Hi everyone. Hi. Happy Monday. How are we doing? I hope we're doing amazing. I have my reading glasses on today. Trust they definitely work. They're not a PNG, I promise. Hi cuties. Hi. Yeah, you like them? So yes, they're cute, thank you. For those who read the schedule or may have read a little bit about the pin comment, today I wanted to try something a little different. Yeah, you might notice we're still in just chatting. That is because we're going to attempt a reading stream today. Way back when I very first started, I attempted to do like a reading YouTube video. Some of you may have seen that video. Hey, I think I maybe sound a little different now. Additionally, I've wanted to try to read it live. Takes away a little bit of the stress and making sure it's all read perfectly. You know, when it's live, you can allow for a little more mistakes, I think. Or I can just go back and reread. But it also gives me a chance to try something out that I wanted to try, which is just reading to y'all. See if y'all enjoy it, or if maybe we would want to do something else in the future. You know? So this is terribly Allie. This is definitely a bit of an experimental stream today. Feedback is 100% welcome. If you think I could be doing something better or shouldn't be doing this at all, or if you would like to see more, definitely let me know, okay? So we're going to be staying in the bedroom today. Huh? I got a little bit of what's called fireplace lo-fi going on in the background. Definitely let me know if it gets too loud, okay? Yeah. I also have the all the redeems still turned on, but y'all shouldn't be able to hear any of them. I think on my end they'll still come through, so you know, use that as you will. But for example, like the fish audio is turned off for today. I'll still let it go though, since we have a whole competition going on. Yeah. Okay though. We're probably gonna get started here in just a second. I've got some yummy tea. Yeah, just like that. Granted, that reading doesn't have a audio component anyway, but the audio component is me. Yeah. Hi, Bradley. Welcome in. Hmm. A story what happened to you, as long as it's appropriate. Yeah, if you was appropriate and such. Mm-hmm. Probably the best audio. You think so? That makes me happy. As y'all may or may not know, I feel like those who frequent here may know that my opinion, my self opinion of my voice is not always the greatest. But mm, I hope it can be a little comfy. Talking a bit of a whisper means that my voice will run out faster, but I feel like it's a little more calm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My voice sounds calm like a librarian today. Aw, you're sweet. Mm-hmm. Did I actually pin that message? Let's go find out. I don't think I did. Let's go back and pin it. Yes, I need to pin this one. Mm-hmm. Did it work? Yes. Why isn't it working? I'll just repost it. Hold on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Why isn't it pinning? Oh, I hate that. Hey, what if I hide that message? Do I need to like go somewhere else to pin it? Why is pinning not working? Hello? Okay, well, uh, hmm. I guess if anybody asks, I will simply tell them the book. Today we're reading. Oh, wait, I could use like a screen message. I'll take over this one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I gotta like go find chat again. It was a long time ago when you were 4 years old. That's cute. I hope you had a fun time. Okay, I'm gonna borrow this message. We'll say book. Mm-hmm. Book. Yeah. We'll like do it that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it. Mm-hmm. So yes, today we're reading The Cascade by Takashi Hiraide. This will be the translation by Eric Selland. Wait, is it 1 hour or 2? Selland, I misspelled that. I knew that sounded weird. It's Selland. 2 L's? 2 L's. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry that happened, Bradley. I hope you're better now. Mm-hmm. Okay. Definitely let me know if the audio is a little unbalanced, music-wise. But we're gonna go ahead and get started. Let me get a little closer to the mic. Oh my goodness, is this ASMR channel now? There. Is that any better? Mm-hmm. Hopefully. It looks a little louder on y'all's end. So maybe I can be a little quieter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We can be whispering. Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Okay. Can you tell I'm anxious? Yeah. All right. At first, it looked like a low-flying ribbons of clouds just floating there. But then the clouds would be blown a little bit to the right and next to the left. The small window in the corner of our kitchen bordered on a tall wooden fence, so close a person could barely pass by. From inside the house, its frosted glass looked like a dim movie screen. There was a small knot hole in the wooden fence, and the green of the bamboo hedge, which was about 10 feet wide, to the north of the alley. Oh, I should read this in like a very proper diction, I guess. There was a small knothole in the wooden fence in the green of the bamboo hedge, which was about 10 feet wide to the north of the alley. It was always projected onto the crude screen. Whenever someone walked by the narrow alleyway, a figure formed, filling the entire window. Viewed from the dark interior of the house, sunny days seemed ever more vivid. And working perhaps on the same principle as the camera obscura, the figures of people walked past were turned upside down. Not only that, but whenever images passed by came from the opposite directions than the one from which people were actually walking. And as the passerby approached closer to the knothole, their overturned figure would swell so large that they would entirely fill the window frame, and once they passed, would suddenly disappear like some special optical phenomenon. But on that day, the image of the ribbon clouds did not attempt to move past, and the image did not grow very large when it neared the knothole. Even when it should have expanded to an enlarged size, the image floating in the upper part of the window was only big enough to sit on the palm of one's hand. The ribbon clouds hesitated, as if hovering on the street, and the sound of a feeble cry arose. My wife and I decided on a name for that little alleyway. We called it Lightning Alleyway. It was about 20 minutes from the teeming Shinjuku terminal, on a private line headed southwest. You got off at a little station where the express didn't stop, and walked south for about 10 minutes. There you hit a bit of an incline. Whale shark, good job. There you hit a bit of an incline, and then at the top of the hill you crossed the only street with any significant traffic going east and west. Once you crossed that diagonally, the rest of the way was downhill, and after about 100 yards down a wide, rambling incline, there was a house to the left with an old-fashioned fence. Its bamboo slats attached vertically along the bottom half of the plastered wall. Just before reaching its gates, you turned into the austere little alleyway to the left, while the road continued on along the wooden fence. Located within the same plastered walls and wooden fence, on the extensive grounds of an old estate. The place we were renting had originally been a guest house. A little more than halfway down the alley, a rickety gate in the wooden fence doubled as the landlady's side entrance and the tenant's front gate. Like an eye that went unnoticed, the knothole was located just beyond that gate. It appears that when I read that my eyes are completely closed. Sorry about that. This model doesn't have the greatest in terms of eye closing sensitivity, so I would just read with my eyes closed, yeah? Maybe it gives the appearance that I'm reading from memory. Passing by behind the fence without knowing just how painfully your image was projected on our window, you would first run head on into the brick wall of the house jutting out from the left, and then you would turn right to an acute angle, and just as suddenly you would run into the house whose roof was connected behind the dense growth of a huge Silkova tree, at which point the path turned sharply again to the left. The frequent sharp turns created the thunderbolt pattern one often sees in drawings, so we jokingly refer to it as Lightning Alley. The huge Silkova tree shading the alley was of an advanced age. Quite likely the local district had designated it as a protected tree. When the house had been built, it had been designed to provide an enclosure for the trunk of the tree. Its branches, which had been allowed to grow and spread unhindered, extend their luxuriant fingers to the east side of the landlady's garden, over to the northeastern corner where the tenant's cottage stood, providing all with a blessing of its leafy protection. By late autumn, the yard would grow thick with fallen leaves, causing the landlady to heave many deep sighs. It was a boy, around 5, in the house next door, also embraced by the huge Sokofa tree. We became determined to capture and keep the stray cat several days after it first crept into Lightning Alley. Though they were our neighbors to the east, the twists and turns of Lightning Alley produced a distance between us. Our daily comings and goings. Oh, despite our daily comings and goings, there was never an opportunity for us to meet face to face. The side of our neighbor's house bordering our garden was a solid wall, with just one small window for ventilation. Hi, Josie. And to be blunt, we were simply renters of the guest house, tucked back in the small corner of the extensive grounds of the estate. So there was little sense of our actually being true neighbors. The boy often played where the alleyway turned sharply, shouting energetically in a high-pitched voice. But since our daily lives took place in such completely different time zones, mine spent facing the desk till late in the night, we rarely crossed paths. Even so, a voice recognizably his traveled over the fence, reaching me one late morning at the breakfast table and firmly announcing the intention to keep the cat. A few days later, I noticed the cat scurrying around our garden, no more than the size required for hanging clothes out on the dry. And I heard the boy's voice and found myself breaking into a smile. Looking back now, I see this as a missed opportunity. Thank you for the hydrate, Josie. How are you doing? Welcome, welcome. I hope you're doing really well. Yeah. Josie here is on her way to affiliate, so if you haven't already, go give her a follow. She's very cute, and she draws really pretty maps. Oh, let's take a look and see who's on the leaderboard, yeah? Let's see who's winning. Oh. Looks like Ashley is firmly in 3rd place, although followed closely by Gecko. Yeah. This might be a competition for 2nd and 3rd place, because Wheatley's so far ahead. Yeah. That wasn't part of the book, that was my own thing. Oh goodness, okay. The little boy's triumphant proclamation must have been heard by the landlady inside the big house. For that evening, we heard her talking in front of the neighbor's gate. How would you like to have that cat? The woman's dry voice was pressing. It's just really too much for us, the voice went on, chatting blithely about how cats infiltrated the presents from every corner, laying waste to the garden, raising a racket on the roof, and sometimes even leading muddy properties inside the house. The young housewife next door spoke in a voice both quiet and refined. One would think she had been placed on the defensive, but after patiently listening to the 80-year-old pleas, it appeared she had no trouble holding her own. In all likelihood, she could see the boy standing behind his grandmother, assumed he was praying for dear life. And, in the end, it seems it was the old woman who lost out. I remember just 2 years earlier, when we signed to rent the guest house from the old woman. There was a clause amendment to the agreement stating that no children or pets were allowed. Neither of us especially wanted a child at that age, or at that point in our lives, even though we were on the verge of passing beyond our mid-30s. And when it came to what referred to as pets, neither of us especially liked cats, and the notion of owning a dog had never come up. So, you could say that based on the old woman's terms of occupancy, we were extremely well-suited renters. There are a few cat lovers among my close friends, and I have to admit there have been moments when that look of excessive sweet affection oozing from them around their eyes has left me feeling absolutely disgusted. Having devoted themselves to cat's body and soul, they seem at times utterly indifferent to shame. When I think about it now, rather than my not being a cat lover, it may simply have been I felt a disconnect with people who were cat lovers. But more than anything, I simply never experienced having one around. I had a dog once when I was a child. I felt my relationship with the dog was simple and frank. The tension felt through the leash between the one who obeys and the one who leads was refreshing. Yeah. On this channel, that might have a second meaning. I must have been right around the same age as the little neighbor boy when I was living with my family in a row house, which acted as a residence for municipal workers. Though the row houses looked much more like tenements in a slum than public buildings. I had only recently gotten the dog when someone up and stole it. Most likely it was a mid-afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday, when my father noticed that the spits, which had been tied up outside the entry, was gone. Dog nappers, he grumbled, then immediately began trying to counteract the event. He stormed out of the house, taking me along, and we raced around in every direction in search of the spits, but there was no sign of either dog or dog napper. I remember clearly feeling that I couldn't ask my father anything more about what had happened, seeing how he'd reacted when the dog went missing. My older sister insists I cried all night long, but I have no memory of that. Although I myself did not especially like cats, my wife has an innate connection with all living things. From the time she was small, she would go out with her older brother to catch crawdads and salamanders and keep them in an aquarium. She said she's even hatched butterflies of all kinds. They would fly around her room. She kept various kinds of birds, finches and canaries, and had also raised chicks. She cared for baby birds that had fallen out of the nest, and had even nursed wounded bats back to health. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying. Even now, she would turn on the TV to a nature program and would correctly name all the animals, even rare species in faraway countries. In my wife's case, what I mean by not liking cats is somewhat of a entirely different order than her husband's attitude. Since all of her life, she had engaged with a variety of animals with the same level of interest. So, in other words, she did not have any sort of preference of dogs over cats. Once a cat had become the next-door neighbor's pet, it would often appear in the gardens in a new vermilion collar. Oh, collar, you say? Hung with a tinkling bell. I mean, just like this one. A little bit of immersion for y'all. Yeah. A simple wooden fence separated by the yard of the main house, and the little garden adjacent to the guest house. The two having originally been one, with its landscapes of trees and little hills, ponds and flower beds. The imposing garden of the main house was most agreeable to the cat. After first stepping into the guest house small garden, the cat would set out on its own for the expanse of the bigger house's yard. Whenever the door to our small garden was left open, the cat was in the habit of peeking inside our house on its way to and from the main yard. Okay, hope you feel better, Bradley. Thank you for being here. The cat wasn't a bit scared of humans, but it was cautious. Just a natural part of its behavior, perhaps. It would gaze at us quietly with its tail standing straight in the air, yet it would never come inside. If we tried to pick it up outside, it would quickly run away. And if we tried to force it to let us hold it, there we go, it would bite. Aware of the ever-vigilant eye of the landlady, we made no real attempts to tame the cat. These events unfolded between the autumn of 1988 and the beginning of winter, during the final months of the Showa period. Maybe I'll leave my mic on now to drink. Yeah. It seems appropriate for more of a ASMR aesthetic, I guess. Is this ASMR? I don't know. Let me know. The cat's name was Chibi, meaning little one. We could hear the boy's particularly high-pitched voice calling the chat. Chat? Chat. Chat. Oh, chat. We could hear the boy's particularly high-pitched voice calling the cat. Chibi. Then we'd hear the sound of the boy's shoes running around outside, followed by the tinkling of the little bell announcing the cat's arrival. Chibi was a jewel of a cat. Her pure white fur was molted with several lamp-black blotches, containing just a bit of light brown. The sort of cat you might see just about everywhere in Japan, except she was especially slim and tiny. These were her individual characteristics. Slim and small, with ears that stood out, tapering off beautifully at the tips, and often twitching. She would approach silently and undetected to rub up against one's legs. At first I thought Chibi avoided me because I was not used to cats. But this seems to have not been the case. When a girl who often passed along Lightning Alley stopped and crouched to gaze at the cat, it did not run away. But as soon as she attempted to touch it, the cat quickly slipped off, avoiding contact at all costs. The cat's manner of rejection was like cold white light. Moreover, the cat rarely made a sound. As far as I remember, when it first appeared in the alley, it made some sort of sound. But since then, it never let out a meow. It looked as if no matter how much time has passed, the cat was not going to let us hear its voice. This seemed to be the message the cat was giving us. Another one of Chibi's characteristics was that she changed the direction of her cautious attention frequently. This active behavior wasn't limited to her kittenhood. Perhaps because she played alone most of the time in the expansive garden. She reacted strongly to insects and reptiles. There were times when I could only conclude that she must be reacting to subtle changes in the wind and light, not detectable by humans. It may be that most cats share the same quickness, but even so, in Chibi's case, it was acute. She was, after all, the cat of Lightning Alley. My wife got into the habit of pointing to the cat whenever it went by, extolling its virtues. Trained by the boy next door, Chibi had become quite skilled at playing with a ball. It seemed that the boy was using a rubber ball that fit right into the palm of one's hand. Sounds of laughter and play in the alley, and the regular bouncing of the ball elicited such pleasant feelings that I gradually began to feel like trying it out for myself, here in our little garden. Finally, one day after a period of self-reflection, I took an old ping-pong ball, which had been shut away in the corner of a drawer, in my hand, and headed for the garden. I tried bouncing the ping-pong ball on the concrete below the open veranda. Chibi crouched, her eyes locked on the ball's movement. Then, she lowered her entire body and became tense, with all four legs aligned as she gently lowered to her haunches, contracting them so that they became slightly rounded like a cock string. From that position, she leapt off the earth with a violent force, boldly bouncing on the small white ball. She then batted the small ball back and forth several times in midair between her two paws. And Nick shot quickly through my legs and ran off. Chibi's independence would manifest itself in unexpected ways. Even while performing acts of most incredible athletic skill, casting aside the ping-pong ball, she turned about in an acute angle, Yet in the next moment she had her tiny paw on the head of a toad concealed in the shade of one of the landscape rocks. Then, just as suddenly, she flew to the other side of the garden, extending one of her front legs to slip into a clump of bushes. Next, showing her white belly, she looked in my direction, twitching slightly. But there was no stopping there. Without a glance or a human playmate, she leapt up, grabbed the sleeve of an undershirt, swinging gently back and forth on the clothesline. Then, flashing through the wooden gate, she quickly retreated to the yard of the front house. I heard from one of my cat-lover friends that playing with a ball was something the cats only did when they were a kitten. But it seems that Chibi, reaching adulthood, only picked up momentum. Which brings us to another quality of Chibi's. In the words of our landlady, she was a real looker. As the opinion of someone with a long history of chasing away stray cats, I figured she knew what she was talking about. There was a photographer who says stray cat lovers always believe that their own cat is better than anyone else's. According to her, they've all got their blinders on. She also says that, though she too is a major cat lover, having noticed this fact only means she is now hated by all other cat lovers. And so these days only takes pictures of scruffy-looking strays. Chibi. Oh. Chibi, who loved to play ball, gradually began to visit us on her own. I would try to get us to play with her. She would step gingerly into the room and gaze intently at its occupants, then purposely turn around and walk back out, as if to lead us to the garden. This process would repeat until she got a response. Most of the time, my wife would put down whatever she was doing, slip happily into her sandals, and head outside. Having played to her heart's content, Chibu would come inside and rest for a while. When she began to sleep on the sofa, like a talisman curled gently in the shape of a comma, and dug up from a prehistoric archaeological site, a deep sense of happiness arrived, as if the house itself had become the scene, or had dreamed the scene. Avoiding the prying eyes of the landlady, we began leaving it up to Chibi to come inside the house whenever she wanted. And with this new development, I began little by little to understand cat lovers. Whether on TV or in all the ubiquitous cat calendars, it seemed that there was no cat comparable to her. Though I had started to think of her as the best cat around, she was really not our cat. First we would hear the tinkling of the bell, and then she would appear, so we began to call her by the nickname Tinker Bell. Whenever she wanted to come over, this name seemed to find itself on her lips. I wonder where Tinker Bell is. By the time my wife had gotten the words out of her mouth, we'd hear the tinkling of Chibi's bell. We realized that she was at the point where, exiting the foyer next door, located at the second corner of the lightning alley, Chibi would leap through the tear in the wire mesh boundary of the property. Oh, good job. Dash along the side of the building, turn at the far end of the veranda, leap into the open area of the deck, and then, placing her paws upon the window frame at about the height of a human adult's knees, stretch out her neck to peek inside. In the winter she came inside, little by little, through the crack in the partially open window. Her tendency to visit subtly developed. Her appearances were repeated until, as if a silken opening in the fabric had been continuously moistened and stretched, GB had entered our lives. But at the same time, calling it fate if you will, or call it fate if you will, something else was closing in and pressing against that tendency. Yeah. I love this book. It is not out of the preference that I use the word fate, or should I say fortuna? Fortuna. We'll say fortuna. It is not out of preference that I use the word fate, or should I say fortuna. But as the young cat's visits became more frequent, I came to feel that there were some things only this word could express. The old mansion was built in the 1920s by a military man from Kyoto, and it said that he brought in gardeners from the old city to work on the landscaping. The property was nearly 5,000 square feet in its entirety, its long side stretching out from east to west. The garden was irrigated by a supply of water brought in from the north-south side, and with a variety of trees arranged about the grounds, boasted a design that made use of subtle changes in scenery, as different flowers came into bloom with each season. The pond, which received water cascading over a waterfall, was located in the center of the garden, a little to the east. And there were 2 planters for water lilies, embracing more than one variety of the aquatic flower, embedded in the earth, a short distance from the pond near the veranda. In addition, there was a smaller cobalt blue Chinese porcelain planter farther away from the veranda, at the edge of the pond, filled with the same black water and more water lilies. I heard the landlady and her husband bought the house in the late 1950s. Their 4 children had, at one time, each flown from the nest, and since the elderly couple had lived there, just the 2 of them. In the care of the trees and plants fell to the hands of the old man. I think I misread that. I'm going to do it again. Their 4 children had, at one time, each flown from the nest, and since then, the elderly couple had lived there, just the 2 of them, and the care of the trees and plants fell to the hands of the old man. It was the summer of 1986 when we first visited the guest house, taken there by a realtor located right across from the main train station. We had been forced to give up our previous rental suite quite suddenly, almost as if some kind of natural disaster had struck. And we were so completely exhausted that we had lost the will to search for a new home. So, we asked an acquaintance to perform a divination, and we were told to follow the direction of fire, Yang, the 3rd calendar sign, which opens to 15 degrees. Concentrating on this fairly narrow, fan-shaped area, with little effort, even unceremoniously, what we encountered was his place. Passing through the shopping districts with its old air and having gone up a slight incline, the area then descended towards the south was all residential. There was little traffic down the rambling slope, though the road was wide. There was little traffic down the rambling slope, though the road was wide. A large variety of plantings stood out against the background of the houses, and a calm atmosphere lingered there. The first time we entered this silence, a strange feeling of peace came upon me, as if a loving hand had gently placed itself upon my chest. It struck me that there seemed quite a large number of elderly people in the neighborhood. Soon, to our left, the old house, with its bamboo slats covering the bottom half of the plaster wall, was pointing out to us, and then, ushered in under the cave, with its roof particularly hidden by pine branches, my wife and I entered the little alleyway. In this discussion of fate, it seems Machiavelli thought that Fortuna dominates at least half our lives, while in the remaining half, or a little less, the human strength, incompetence, virtue attempts to counteract it. Which he imagined fate as a goddess, capricious and fickle, or as a river, which could flood at any moment. Machiavelli, active in the politics of the Florentine Republic, and known to succeeding generations for his political writing as the ultimate realist, was also a poet of rich and varied rhetorical flourishes. He left behind numerous He left behind numerous poems, plays, and allegories. In his writing, extending across a wide range of literary forms, the theme of fortuna and the word virtue, translated variously as competence, virtue, ability, skill, valor, grit, or backbone, and vigor, impulse, or momentum, only a sampling of the more than 20 possible renderings of here. And when in addition to these, the necessary, the essential, perhaps even desperate word, necessitia appears, a unique feeling of exaltation is communicated. Virtue di necessità. In other words, Machiavelli suggests that only the skills displayed in times of emergency can successfully overcompete with fate. It is said that when comparing fate to a river, Machiavelli meant the Arno, which often brought floods to Florence. In his position as a secretary of the government of Florence, he worked with Leonardo da Vinci, who had been hired as a military architect, and attempted to realize a grandiose plan to change the natural course of the river. But the plans, initiated 500 years ago, was plagued by misfortune, disasters both natural and man-made. It was a major failure. In reading Machiavelli's literary works, of the many metaphors used to express fate, most essentially meaningful is the river which could flood at any time. An image used in chapter 2. I almost got 2.4 alley. An image used in chapter 24 of The Prince. Perhaps, because having directly experienced such a major failure himself, he knew its sheer agony. So let us liken fate to a destructive river here as well. The river rages, flooding the plain, consuming trees and buildings before it, washing away the earth and carrying it away to the other side. As it surges forward, people flee, but ultimately they succumb to the water's momentum. No one escapes. Living beings, in turning a corner, or in producing the movements required to enter the crack in a certain partially open door, are endowed with certain properties, something which produces its own little river. These daily movements are repeated, and a certain tendency, a certain current, if you will, is generated. Then this minor current, because it is a current, must at some point flow into a larger river. Not only his political writings, but also his poetries, plays, and allegories. Not only in his political writings, but also in his poetry, plays, and allegories. Cannot Machiavelli perhaps be read as having, at bottom, this flow at the basis of his thinking? That was always a difficult chapter for me to read. Lots of big words for my poor little brain. Yeah. Yummy. It occurs to me that y'all actually might not be able to hear me flip pages. Let's try. Maybe a little bit. I could mess with the filters, but we can do that next time. My legs are all sweaty. No worry. Cute brain. Aww. You're cute. Hi, Henry. Wanna come sit on my lap, baby? We'll do it now if you're gonna. I'm gonna start the next chapter soon. Yeah. Lorelai's being a very good girl and going to sleep. I think Henry's looking for a place to lay down. Yeah. Okay. The kitchen dining area was snuggled up against the first sharp corner of Lightning Alley. Thank you, Tika. I appreciate that. From the windows facing west above the sink, the big house's own kitchen window was visible, while on the opposite side of the cottage towards the east, our bay window in the dining room often revealed the heads of people turning the corner of the alley. visible just beyond the steel wire, stretched across the top of the wooden fence. Moving in a southerly direction through our guest house, you first pass through the greeting area, a small space only 2 tatami mats in size, which looked towards the main entryway on the right with its lattice door of frosted glass, and opposite that, the sliding door of a closet on its left. Once past this room, you arrived at a large Japanese-style room the size of 6 tatami mats. Entering, you first noticed the traditional tokonoman in the immediate right, while a closet took up the rest of that side on the wall. On the east side was a glass door, designed to look like a traditional latticework paper door, through which you could see the backs of people beyond the fence, who would just walk past the second lightning-shaped corner, or continuing their walk down the alley. Beyond the 6-mat room was another room not quite as large, this one with a hardwood floor facing a little courtyard for drying clothes. The wooden fence continued beyond the miniature garden, turned, and came around, moss-covered, doing wonderful to block the view of the landlady's impressive garden of goings-on in her place. The cottage's design provided many windows on the west side, of the room. Why is there a race car? Maybe we'll change that. Yeah, this is called Zoomers. Oh. This is okay. I want more of like a fireplace radio. Is that okay? I think I like this better. Yeah. There we go. The cottage's design provided many windows. On the west side of the room with the hardwood floor, a round window with a vine-covered bamboo lattice was cut into the wall, leading one to believe it was originally a tea room, or it may have also been a moon-viewing room as well. I had been told that the view of the garden with its artificial hills had been the best from here, but now it was obstructed by the addition of a bath, and the furniture of his residence had nearly destroyed the elegant design. So many windows still had a relaxing effect on the weary. On the south side, running a full length of the room, there was a large window, from knee-high up to the ceiling, which was nearly 12 feet wide, and provided a sweeping view of the horizon. And yet, since the owner's garden wall ran along beyond the house, there was no real windows to speak of in the wall of the large neighboring residence to the east, and because of the natural features of the land itself, with its downly southern slope, no eyes fell upon the interior. Partly out, the eaves, their outermost made of glass, hung over the garden and became an oblique starlight, inviting in all the sunlight one wanted. One day in early spring, 1887, 6 months after having moved into the new place, I opened wide the windows with its aluminum sash, and the wind came in from the south like an avalanche of snow. Then, one after the other, I opened all the other windows in the house. The window of the kitchen sink, of course, and the glass lattice windows in the 2-bedroom on the east side, followed by the bay window in the dining room, and then the bathroom window. The house quickly became a hollow cavity for the wind to race through. I stared in blank amazement as the courtyard for drying clothes, where the clouds in the sky ran quickly past. 2 slender branches of mistletoe, which had been entwined there, snapped in the wind and fell. I looked up to see our neighbor's great Silkova tree, gradually encroaching upon our side of the fence, blasted by the wind, causing both branches and trunk to sway violently. Through the slanted skylight, a few rays of sun would pierce for just a moment and then vanish, only to return, combined with the buds blown in from the plum tree, Everything timed to the rhythm of illumination and concealment. The small desk had been toppled in the wind, scattering the various papers which had been placed there all about the room. Now, like beings with a will of their own, they rose up as if attempting to return to the place from where they had fallen. Upon the arrangement of objects once the arrangement of objects had settled down, I felt that I was finally ready to establish myself in this place. This is where I will live, I thought to myself. Perhaps it was because I now developed a feeling for the passing of the seasons on our new home, or in our new abode, as if each house, each new neighborhood contained its own unique experience of the passage of time. To the south side of the room with the hardwood floor, there was what they call a tea room parlor, a hanging ceiling. Oh, there was what they call in tea room parlance a hanging ceiling. This was where the slanting eaves of the roof from outside ran into the interior, so that the ceiling on one side of the room shared the same slope. And this sloping ceiling of frosted glass, with slits like a bamboo screen, doubling the effect of the skylight. I would lie here on a woven mat, using my arms as a pillow, and await the changing of the light. Spring rain began to fall. I thought I could observe the change in the size of the raindrops, as if they'd been placed on a slide for viewing microscopic specimens if I closely watched the initial splatter of rain. I would also gaze blankly at the movement of clouds and the dancing of the great trees' leaves surrounding the house. The shadow of burnt rust passing by was the elegant belly of one of the thieving cats, which would often come and go from the property. Hi, Sushi. Welcome. We reach a little break from me. Yeah. How are you? Sushi's very cute. There won't be any audio, but you should definitely go check them out. I hope you're doing amazing. Yeah. We're trying out a bit of a reading stream today. Yeah. Happy you can make it. Bit of an experiment today. A bird would alight on the eaves and press its pink feet against the glass roof, and just as soon begin to slide down its slippery surface. Taken by surprise, the bird would always quickly flee, making it to one of the wooden crosspieces in a few wing beats, making the translucent surface of the eaves, causing unending confusing for the birds. Time passed as I slowly built up the courage to resign from the publishing job that I kept for the last few years. Often work-related situations would find me out on the town, where there was non-stop drinking. And then on the weekends, I would while away the hours playing baseball. I began to feel that I was throwing away the time I needed to work my own writing. The days seemed to rush by faster and faster, and my work as an editor, supporting the writing efforts of others, began to make less and less sense. One day I had developed a large blister on my right upper arm, apparently caused by too much baseball. A few days later, the blister spread to my right shoulder, and then all the way up to the right side of my neck. Then complications occurred. For a while, my thought process became sluggish. Speaking became difficult, perhaps because the nerves on the right side of my neck are related to the speech center in the left side of my brain. As it turns out, I had shingles. That's not good. I'll not say that. As it turns out, I had shingles. On one side of my body, the virus had spread all along the nervous system. I underwent treatment for a month, but the nature of the disease is such that one never knows when one's condition might be thrown out of order. And in the end, this is what finally encouraged me to make up my mind to quit my job. Congrats on breaking 40 teacup. Yeah. And yet, all the same, I was unable to build up courage to act on this plan. After all, there was no way I could make a living just on the projects I had accumulated at that point. So I went from day to day in an atmosphere of gloom. But at the same time, something about having settled into our new place brought the expected challenges of the new year starkly before my eyes. I approached my wife, who was in the kitchen. Let's go to a cafe. Or that's more his voice, so it's more, let's go to a cafe. What would his voice be? I mean, I could do a lower voice, but it might be hard to go back. You know what, he gets a high-pitched voice too. I approached my wife, who was in the kitchen. Let's go to a cafe. Why do I have the feeling I don't want to hear this? She drew back, knowing somehow what it was I had to say. At a little cafe in the old shopping district near the station, I laid out a chart on the table, which I had drawn up showing the writing projects I had in process at the time, with per page payments and royalties I could expect from each, and dates when payments could be expected. At the time, my wife held a contract with a publishing company as a proofreader. Her job was to check the revised version of the galleys, first reading through the text without checking against the manuscript, then fact-checking and verifying references. She would also point out errors in translated text, ensure proper usage of kanji characters, and, in some cases, improve upon sentence construction. So I had her annual income added to the chart, and with all the data spread out before us, reached the virtues of having us both work from home. In any case, it looked like we could handle expenses for at least a year and a half. I myself knew that beyond that there was no guarantee, but in my role as a seducer, I realized that absolute self-conscience was de rigueur. So I pushed ahead with my soliloquy, drawing a picture of our new life together. Frugal, yet with the beauty of simplicity. She was still a bit nervous about the whole thing. But my wife, seeing the sheer effort I made to get to this point, how painfully slow and careful my decision had been, couldn't bring herself to demolish the fan I had brought up. We went home and ate dinner, then returned to our desks placed side by side near the window on the south side of the house, taking up our own meager work. Before we knew it, it was the middle of the night. For no particular reason, my wife looked up and let out a muffled gasp of surprise. The full moon shone above the glass eaves above us, with their slits like bamboo screen, so that its image was drawn out, flowing there like a milky white river. Well, hello there, Mr. Henry. Hi. Hi, baby. You're adorable. Do you want to come sit on my lap? Be good for me. Come here. Come here. Although you might make my legs more sweaty. Pretty boy. Yeah. It's best to go empty-handed. This was the advice of friends, all of them writers with whom I had worked over the years. Oddly enough, it was the fact that having supported first-rate work would eventually lend me to give up my job. I'd always dealt with my writers with an honest respect, which came directly from me rather than demands of etiquette. They were almost like a family in a way, yet distant, yet close. All of a type, and several who came to me after I looked after till their last breath. I myself had by this time passed my mid-30s, and was about to enter that territory called middle age. And here I was filling out the forms to officially leave my job. I resigned from the publishing company in the summer of 1987. Now I was unattached, but in January of the following year, I received news that an old friend, with whom I had been close but hadn't quite seen in some time, was apparently on the edge of death. Though a bit older than me, Y was a drinking buddy. Or maybe I'll call him E. We'll say Y. Y was a drinking buddy, and one of my baseball friends. Most of all, he was a poet of my generation, and I had great respect for his many talents. He eventually married, and 2 children were born. Next came a house in the northerly suburb, and when invited to play ball, he'd come up with some kind of excuse, his voice trailing off almost painfully, so I stopped calling, and gradually we grew apart. Over the course of time, always keeping a busy schedule as a production editor in the city, and catching the last stream home, he developed colon cancer, and in the spring of 1986, underwent hours of surgery. He was told, friends were notified, that it was an intense intestinal obstruction. Hailing from the snow country in the far north, he was hard-working and loyal. Soon after leaving the hospital, he was back at work, returning to his usual habits. Though on the commute, he began using the handrails when taking the stairs at the station, where he would change strange. His poems were now rarely seen in the magazines. The noble-minded do not trust others aside in order. The noble-minded do not thrust others aside in order to make their way in the world. But then they themselves are ultimately thrust aside by the advancing tide. When I rushed to the hospital to find Y on a sick bed, he turned his face, swollen like a catcher's mitt due to the poison in his system caused by kidney failure. And with a splendid beast maintaining its silent pride, managed a broken smile. That was a hard sentence. In the hallway, the doctor informed us that he only had 2 weeks left. It's killing him, I thought, and it'll kill you too. Never forget that. What is it? I felt I could see what it was quite clearly now. But then something completely unexpected happened. The cancer cells, which had multiplied in the kidneys, underwent necrosis, and were then discharged in the body along with urine. Miraculously, Y recovered temporarily, and then, perhaps because of this strong painkiller, we were able to talk again like we used to when we were out drinking together, ostentatiously, with bravado. And he was able to joke with the visitors who came to see him. For someone like myself who no longer worked a 9-to-5 job, it was perfect. So, for 4 months I visited dutifully, commuting to the suburban hospital as if I were dropping by one of the old watering holes we used to haunt. During this time, Y organized and arranged his complete works for completed poems, which a group of friends he had gotten together to produce. After the galleys were in hand, he even managed to write 4 new poems. Then, having dragged himself that far, he passed away in the late May of 1988. Looking back on it now, I'd say one's 30s are a cruel age. At this point, I think of them as mine. At this point, I think of them as a time I whiled away unaware of the tide that could suddenly pull you out, beyond the shallows of seas into hardship and even death. It was during that time that I learned of Y's dangerous condition when I discovered the strange optical phenomenon of our house. One day in the early afternoon, I heard a voice calling from the kitchen. My wife, who had left her desk, was nowhere to be found. There was only a voice coming from somewhere around the first corner of Lightning Alley. Watch me from behind the little window in the kitchen. In the darkness behind the little door of the toilet, located in the corner of the kitchen, there was a space not quite 3 feet square, with a window hung like a projection screen. The only window in the house faced south, closed against the early spring chill. In the center of the polished glass, there was a particular line of a dimly floating screen, which I became aware of now for the first time. Perhaps a corner of the hardwood floor was reflected there. At just that moment, the sounds of footsteps slowly approached from the right, advancing purposefully, and my wife, in the form of an inverted image in vivid color, appeared from the left, stretched out for all a proportion. As soon as the image appeared, it disappeared to the right, passing in the opposite direction of the sound of footsteps. Quickly, I pulled open the window. There was a knothole in the wooden fence no larger than a coin. Placing my eye close to peek through, I could see the house on the other side of Lightning Alley, in the high garden hedge. But the image in the hole was turned upside down. I asked my wife to walk back and forth a few times outside the window, and we had some fun repeating our little experiment with this simple yet vivid illusion. Next, I called my wife inside, and I took her place in the streets, walking back and forth so she could see the visual effects. Then, both of us sat on the raised platform of the too-wide mat greeting area just inside the entry, eagerly awaiting the arrival of passerby, though this was a rare event on Lightning Alley. Like a camera obscura, which transmitted only that what it needed, the house, with its breezy interior, had a soothing effect on the soul. Hi, Prophet. Welcome in. Hope you're having a good time. Yeah. My legs are still very sweaty. I'm sorry, Monica. This is English only. I'm not be able to understand that. I hope you're having a very lovely day, though. I often remember the appearance of Chiefy the cat and the scene in the guest house when she first came inside. It was in the late autumn of 1988. The Emperor's condition had deteriorated rapidly after he vomited blood in the mid-September, and now everyone in Japan seemed to be in the mood for voluntary restraint. There was a narrow space in the earthen floor for the washing machine facing the courtyard, which was a mere token of the garden partitioned off from the spacious garden of the big house. One shining sunny afternoon, slipping through a crack in the open door, 4 bright white feet stepped softly under the room's insulated drainboard. And with a well-honed curiosity rushing through her entire body, Chiefy quietly surveyed the meager interior. The old landlady was constantly driving off the calico cat, owned by the neighbors to the south. There was also a black bicolored cat, more of a combination of Indie ink and a muddy color than burnt rust. An old alley cat who managed to infiltrate the property. We heard this cat would sneak in the houses when people were gone, if a sliding door was left open even a crack. My wife affectionately called her Miss Muddy, or at least stated clearly that no children or pets were allowed. But then one day the landlady told my wife that she was sorry that she worded it that way. Apparently, the elderly couple had simply wanted some peace and quiet. But their quiet life changed when the old man became older and weaker, and lay bedridden in the western-style bedroom on the west side of the house. And then the landlady took on the burden of all the sundry chores, the entire estate, until it was more she could handle. Now she seemed to be attempting to take control of the stray cats as well, and rid the premise of them. Cats being cats, they would be found everywhere in the spacious garden, perched on a fence railing at some particular height, and she devoted herself to arbitrary searches and capricious measures ranging from the whimsical to the mad. Once Chiefy had learned how to get into the little house, she would slip quietly inside as long as we left the door open a crack. She would never cause any mischief. She would simply stroll through the house in a leisurely fashion. Often she hid her soft body, with its pattern of lamp-black spots floating on her pure white coat of fur, between various objects in the room. She never made a sound, nor would she allow us to hold her. If you tried to hold her, she would simply let out a barely audible bite your hand softly and then slip out of your arms. My wife was quick to reprimand such advances, laughing at her husband with his bitten hand. She declared she would never hold Chibi. She's a free spirit. She can do what she wants. So Chibi remained unfettered, coming and going as she pleased. Soon she began to sleep wherever she wished, in whatever position she liked. Aw, hi Lorelai. From the end of that year, 1988, to the beginning of the next, I struggled to complete the work of writing 2 books commissioned by a publisher. Other than one ring of the bell on New Year's Eve at the old Buddhist temple nearby, and a brief pilgrimage to a Shinto shrine located in the opposite direction, followed by a visit to an all-night goodie shop, I took part in none of the usual year-end or New Year's festivities, but remained at my desk hard at work. The urgent work kept the atmosphere in the house tense till nearly dawn. But just when I had reached a point of exhaustion and was beginning to feel desperate, invariably a small, dim white shadow leapt onto the open veranda and rested its front feet on the window frame. Peering in through the large window on the east side of the room from which the desk faced. I opened the window and welcomed in the guest, accompanied by the winter surprise, and the mood inside the house was restored. Chibi was our first New Year's visitor. They call the visitors who go around to all the houses on New Year's Day to wish everyone a Happy New Year's they call them pilgrims. Curiously enough, though she didn't offer a prayer. When this pilgrim came through the window, she did seem to be familiar with at least one formal greeting, where the hands, or in this case the paws, are placed together in the front of the door, or placed together on the floor to kneel before one's host. So this is how the new year began. And on the 7th of January, news raced to the Japanese archipelago. I should know how to say this word. Archipelago. The island chains. On the 7th of January, news raced to the Japanese archipelago that the emperor had finally succumbed. Somehow by that time I managed to write 2 books. Both of them were about baseball. Yeah. One moment, please. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that that Russian was not something inappropriate. It just says, why is this recommended to me? I don't even know English. That's funny. You gotta go? We have a test tomorrow. Good luck, Willie. Good luck. Mwah. You can totally do it. I believe in you. Have a very good rest. Yeah. Okay. Let me slightly adjust here. Yeah. We made a door to the room that only Chibi could get through, not any other cats. Below the large window on the south wall, there was a floor-level window of frosted glass about 16 inches tall running the full length of the one above it, for sleeping out the dust. By opening this window just 3 inches, a gap was left which only Chibi could squeeze through. In order to prevent the cold air and insects from getting in, we hung a thick cotton curtain of royal blue over it. On the wooden floorboards in the corner of the Japanese-style room, placed a cardboard box, which had originally contained mandarin oranges, to act as Chibi's own special room. We put a towel in the box and a dish for her food. Then, we set a bowl of milk beside the box. If Chibi happened to come in when the box would have been moved to the other room for cleaning, she would immediately notice that it was missing, and then fall into a heap on the floor in confusion. Her vermilion collar would occasionally be replaced by a lavender one. We never knew which color she would appear in on any particular day, but Chibi seemed to know that she had an additional home, where she would be cared for, even if by people not in a position to choose a new color for her. Once Chibi came over when two editors happened to be visiting. Aware of the visitors, she circled several times around my wife, who was standing as if to lay claim to her. She let it be known that we were now her caretakers. One afternoon, when the spring equinox had passed, Chibi had been out hunting. She arrived with a sparrow between her jaws. With her hackles up, she let out a howl and, aggressively stomping to make her footsteps heard, trotted around and around the guest house. I heard that when cat bring in a kill, it brings it back to show its owners. It was almost as if the house itself was the subject of display for Chibi, as she circled around many times over, yowling the whole time. Afterwards, she went to the vegetable garden on the far eastern end of the main garden, and played with the unlucky sparrow until it no longer moved. As she finished the poor sparrow's burial, my wife repeated her early declaration. I won't hold Chibi, she said. It's more gratifying to let animals do whatever they like. As April came around, gossamer winged butterflies covered the garden, dancing just above its surface and coloring it a blue-gray. It seemed impossible for anyone walking in the garden to avoid stepping on them. What's interesting about animals, my wife explained, is that even though a cat may be a cat, in the end, each individual has its own character. For me, Chibi is a friend with whom I share an understanding, and who happens to take the form of a cat. Then she told me about a philosopher who said that observing is at its core, an expressive of love, which doesn't get caught up in sentiment. By this time, my wife's notebook had become a daily record of Chibi's activities. In June, I left my wife to look after the house and embarked upon a tour. I had been assigned to write an article about several cities in US and Canada. It was during this time that change apparently occurred in Chibi's behavior. Perhaps she'd been well-trained, but for whatever reason, Chibi never jumped up onto the sofas or beds. She would carefully walk around the house, around cushions meant for sitting Japanese style on the floor of the tatami room. But then, one night when my wife was sleeping, Chibi jumped up onto the covers and lay down beside her. Ever since, she was in the habit of sleeping next to her. Meanwhile, I had caught a cold in the US, and as soon as I got home, headed straight to bed. Chibi happened along, and as had become her custom, jumped up onto the covers, and only to notice that a different person was there. She hesitated, and then jumped onto the mirror stand. After admiring herself for a moment in the mirror's reflection, she hopped down and disappeared into the darkness of the closet, quickly slipping by the strips of cloth hanging over the opening. The top shelf of the closet was her favorite place to sleep. Since it had no door, we simply hung strips of cloth in front of it, so it was easier for her to come and go. Chibi was able to sleep comfortably wherever she wanted, and from then on, we got into the habit of laying on the futon early in the evening, so that we too, the human residents, could sleep any time we wanted as well. Oh, excuse me, laying out the futon early. Yeah. Stretch. Mm. I hope you're all having a very good time. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for the hydrate. But I already just hydrated. I'll have another sip just for you. Mm-hmm. Mm. But thank you, teacup. Yummy. June 21st, 1989 is the date my wife broke off her friendship with Chibi. My parents, who were visiting from Kyushu, brought my wife a gift, one of their local delicacies, a giant mantis shrimp from the Ariake Lake, known as shappa in the local dialect. Removed from their package, their size was immediately evident, at least twice as big as what is served at the average sushi shop. I'm doing well, Chelsea. I'm glad you're lurking. I hope you're having a wonderful time. On their heads were two large pairs of antennae, one large and one small. Or two pairs of antennae, one large and one small. They had 5 pairs of legs, the second pair of which, attached to the thorax, was especially large and shaped like a sickle or scythe, which could be used for capturing small shrimp and crabs. Their tails were shaped like large plates and used for digging holes in the mud along the shallows of the seashore. They were of the color of topaz, and several iridescent violet streaks ran down their back. If you poured boiling water on them, the purple streaks turned into bronze. From the early summer catch, they also sported eggs, making them a highly prized delicacy. As soon as they were brought out for the evening meal, boiled and lightly seasoned, the sound of the bell could be heard. The guest had arrived. Once she caught sight of the shrimp, Chibi could not contain her excitement. Her behavior was completely different from when she was offered fresh fish or sashimi. But as always, my wife called to her, and tearing off a piece of shrimp with her fingers, extended her hand towards Chibi's mouth. The fur on Chibi's back stood up like a shark's dorsal fin. Her tail swelled up like a raccoon's. Having finished that morsel in the blink of an eye, perhaps it was the taste, or the texture, or how it went down smoothly, she became all the more excited. My wife offered her another piece. Again, Chibi gobbled it up in an instant. At the table from the place opposite, you could see the red tongue in her mouth curled like a flame. Chibi couldn't wait for the next mouthful. Perhaps the whole process had become too tedious, too painfully slow for her. I could see her slowly rise, inch by inch, her whole being focused on her prey. Her eyes narrow like a warrior demon guarding the gate of an ancient temple. And on her front feet, resting against the dining table, you could see the claws become more visible. Mm-hmm. All right now, you can. Oh, sorry. All right now, you can wait your turn. Almost before she could get the words out of her mouth, Chibi, having moved into a haunting posture, sunk her fangs deeply into my wife's hand as she attempted to pull the shrimp away. Hi, Lucy. The blood began to flow. Then a voice more of anger than of pain burst forth. And now the spell was broken. Out! Get out! It's over between us. The powerful impact of her words frightened Chibi, who made a hasty retreat into the opening in the floor level window. At first I thought it was funny that my wife addressed the little cat as if she were a close human friend, or even a lover with whom she was breaking things off. But later I realized she meant it. That bite was for real, she said, doing her best to endure the pain. At first I thought it was temporary. Just a little spat over the shrimp, but the wound was deep. First, she closed tight the floor-level window. Then she put away the blue royal curtain, the cardboard box, the dish, and the towel, which had been inside it. On the next day, and the day after as well, my wife silently washed the paw prints off the large window with an old piece of cloth. 3 days passed, and then in the middle of the night, a sound came from the large window which had been shut tight. The sound was repeated over and over again, a soft, quiet sound. My wife walked over to the window from the tatami room and opened the curtain. Something was repeatedly bumping against the window, with the same unchanging look in her eyes. I took a peek at my wife's notebook around that time, and this is what she wrote. It was small and white, with eyes wide open, like a bird striking a lighthouse. I hope you're doing well, Lucy. Yeah. Yeah. Lucy's very cool. Y'all should all go check them out. A little afternoon on the day of the hi Vox. Hi. A little afternoon on the day of the Tanabata Festival in 1989, there was a phone call from nearby. The ambulance had arrived to pick up its passenger. With a quiet tension in the air, we went out to see them off. The old man was placed on a stretcher and then put in the ambulance. It was a clear day, and he squinted from the glare of the bright sun. The driver, wearing white gloves, folded the stretcher's legs and began a first attempt in loading it onto the back of the van designed for transporting the sick and elderly. But he had the thing in backwards and had to start all over again. The tired old body, covered with summer bedding, was spun once around in the road to perform the task. A group of high school students in their navy blue uniforms passed by, looking back over their shoulders. The old lady, carrying only a small handbag, stoically greeted each of the neighbors who had come to see her off. Then the kerosene delivery man, who was normally seen only coming and going as he sold his wares, drove up in his private car to give her a lift. The old lady climbed into the front seat next to the driver, an expression of restraint showing on her face, as she did her best to fight off her emotions. When the two cars had disappeared over the hill, we stepped into the entrance of the main house for the first time. Now it was empty. We stood in the kitchen for a while, chatting with the woman who worked there as a housekeeper for many years, as if to soothe the melancholy of parting. After she left, we adjusted the lock on the new gate, which had been installed for additional protection due to the lengthy amount of time the owner would be absent. Then we went back inside the house and inspected every corner of its interior, now almost bare of any kind of furniture, from closets to shutters. A small counter had been left behind, attached to a pillar in the living room. The date, July 7th, remains inscribed in my memory. From the veranda on the south side of the house, we were able to look out over the spacious garden. From there, it became evident that merely renting the guest house on the east side of the garden had given us no clue to exactly how unique it was. Though the landlady had told us we were free to stroll through the garden, to which the old man had been devoted any time we liked, we had never gotten any farther than the eastern edge of our own house. Through the sliding glass door, we could see the figure of the old man who had come immobile, lying completely still on his bed, or at times seating in a rocking chair. But the landlords were gone from the main house. The castle was without its lord. Gazing out from the veranda of the deserted house, we could see that the wooden fence which acted as a boundary between it and the neighbors to the south had fallen to a state of advanced disrepair, and, tilting, had been taken over by vines and creepers. Creepers? Oh, man. Oh, no. Oh. Anyway. It took some time, but gradually the old woman realized it was impossible for her to maintain the garden on her own. The years of caring for her husband had taken their toll, and little by little she had lost her drive. But even without the question of death, an inheritance had become imminent. She hated the idea of becoming a burden to others, not even her own children, let alone strangers. So as she saw herself growing more feeble, she made that firm decision the year before to put everything in order at the house where they had lived for 30 years, and to move to an apartment complex where the elderly was provided nursing care. Naturally, this meant she would have to eventually close up the rental as well. So, if nothing else, it seemed fitting to make use of what time was left to us to enjoy the expansiveness of the garden. When I went out to water the garden, taking hold of the hose and turned the spigot connected to an electric pump, a white-tailed skimmer dragonfly, which was always seated on the same large rock beside the pool in a good place to catch the sun, would float its pure blue body, brushed lightly in a layer of white, up into the air, and cautiously approach a stream of well water spurting from the mouth of the hose. I placed my fingers over the opening to split the stream of the water in two, making an arc suspended in the air larger and higher. Now there was enough distance that the skimmer would not be frightened. It took flight then and approached the stream of water in midair, kissing it like a precision machine. As this became my habit each morning, the skimmer gradually started to fly straight for the water as soon as I began spraying. And would stay there in the waterfall, which hung in midair for a long time. I read in the book that the male of the species is solitary, intends to stake out fairly extensive territories, and prefers being near water. Because of this, I knew it must always be the same one. Just as I was about to utter the word friend, he flew away. But I enjoyed his company while I could. A wire laundry line was awkwardly stretched between, nails on the guest house and the big house for hanging out the wash. One day near the end of August, the blue skimmer was there on the line, still young and strong, copulating with a yellow female. His tail was raised and rested on his head, so that together they formed what looked like a bracket in the shape of a distorted heart. When I approached them for a closer look, they flew away without ever breaking formation, and moved again to a branch on the other side of the trees on the west side of the garden. Again, I drew near in order to observe them more closely, and again the distorted heart danced away in the sky above my head. What a pervert. You're having a fun time, Shay. I'm glad. And of course, Lucy, I hope you're doing well as well. I hope you're doing good as well. Yeah. My voice is starting to crack a little bit, but I think we should be fine to do a little bit more. Yeah, maybe 2 hours. Big stretch. Yeah. I continued to work in the garden for relaxation during writing breaks, cleaning out reeds at the pond, removing cobwebs between the rocks and trees, and pulling out weeds until the vast space with its fold and depth was transformed. Now I was beset with the problem of how to maintain it in that condition. Once I had gotten the details, I ended up spending half my day there. A professional gardener landscaper reaches a garden's overall harmony, but it did not look like I would reach that point very soon. I couldn't help but thinking about the fact that within the year, the house and its garden would most likely put up for sale. And yet, despite that knowledge, I had begun acting as if I were a living groundkeeper, setting up house in the corner of the premises, large enough to be a public park. I found I was frequently calling the old woman, now living in an apartment for the elderly out in the suburbs, to ask about every little thing. She would then ask me to look up numbers for her in the little phone book she had left behind, and sent me off on all kinds of little errands like picking up documents at the local government office and so on. Each time, I would ask how the old man was doing, but it seemed he was only getting progressively worse, and he was eventually placed in the hospital attached to the elder care facility. Before she hung up, the old woman would always remind me that we were free to make use of the house any time we wanted. And feel free to make use of the air conditioner, she would say, until the familiar line changed to use the heater. It was already late fall. The old man died at the hospital. We heard the news from their daughter, and then the old woman insisted that we attend the funeral, which was held near the elder care facility. So we ended up invited, landlord and tenant, the big house and the guest house, a relationship which has gone on for barely 3 years. And yet here we were, seated among the guests at the funeral, as if we were distant relatives. I pondered on how things have ended up this way. There was, of course, a certain chemistry between my wife and the old woman. I don't know why, but for some reason they got along extremely well. You could certainly say that the old woman was skilled at maintaining just the right distance, despite having living on the same premises. There we go. But after all, it's not if we were actually family. So on the way home from the funeral, we dropped by the Tokorozawa ballpark to take in a doubleheader, which, as it turns out, was the decisive battle in leading into the playoffs. Still in black funeral attire, we did wave as a couple for the first time. But I somehow felt this was as according to the old lady's wishes. She would sometimes point out to us the importance of being natural, of being ourselves. I remember one time she dropped by for one of her occasional chats with my wife, seated on the top steps of the side entrance. So what if you don't have children? There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have children if you don't want to. Just be yourself. According to my wife, this could not have been mere consolation. There were some echoes about past misfortune, which led to this insight. And yet there were no signs that she had suffered from extensively because of having had children, all 4 of them, whom we eventually met. And both the 2 we chanced to meet at the house, and the ones we were introduced at the funeral, seemed to have grown into fine young adults who had established their own quite respectable households, which had made the old woman's words all more mysterious. Ever since that day, the day of the Tanabata festival, I would leave the sliding glass doors in the veranda of the big house open in the afternoon to keep the place aired out. I brought the old man's bedside table from the Western-style room out onto the veranda to use as a desk, and sat deep down in the armchair that originally used in the guest room, and began writing there on the veranda in a spot which gave me clear view over the garden. I avoid using the air conditioner even on especially hot days. I don't like air-conditioned rooms to begin with, and the structure of the house with its extended eaves providing shade in the open Japanese-style room did not require it. In the empty air of the old manor, with some of the usual household objects to attract notice, one felt the presence of the house itself. Since it was not my own house, I enveloped in the thickness of its atmosphere, the sheer power of its place. Once I was called back to the guest house to take a phone call, and I left the main house empty for a while. When I returned, Chibi had come over from the neighbor's garden to play, and was there inside the house. When she saw me, she quickly ran away. She never did that to me at the guest house. It seems a whole different relationship sprung up between us when we met at a different place. Settling into the old man's comfortable sofa for a long afternoon, I watched as the butterflies and bees buzzed around the veranda. Eventually, they would steal into the darkness of the parlor. Then, drifting room for room, would sometimes end up staying a long while. Once, a blue admiral fluttered in, its implausible hue enhanced by its black wings, and sat for a while on the edge of one of the cushions. So that's how the year passed. 1989, a year which we entered a new era with its own new name. And summer dissolved into autumn, and autumn deepened. Even at night I continued to work amid the sounds of the insects, the view of the Kyoto-style garden, a collection of well-trimmed green hemispheres all piled up one on top of the other. There was a black and white photo of the old magazine, of an author's all too perfect writing space, and hence unreal. But when I thought about how this place would soon be taken from me, I became extremely anxious, I began to feel pressed to clear away all the work that had piled up. Late one night, I heard the sound of someone at the front door, which should not have been opening. At the far end of the long hallway was the shadow of a man, perhaps in his 50s. While I was still unable to make out the figure in the shadows, whoever it was called my name, apparently to offer reassurance. "Oh, sorry. I meant to call first." It was one of the old woman's sons. We met at the funeral. He was one of the directors of the company in Tokyo, but lived down the coast a bit, a couple hours outside the city. Our landlady had mentioned that he might occasionally stay over if he got too late, and he missed his train. Out on the veranda, the old man's side table overflowed with the mountains of books I had collected as reference material, and the piles of paper which I had written notes and the beginnings of sentences and chapters. Aside from that, the entire house was completely empty, but the visitor was obviously at home as he removed his jacket and, somewhat inebriated, began loosening his tie. He seemed to be doing these things merely to make me feel less comfortable in my overly informal attire. Go ahead and you'd be really deep, Whitney. Go ahead and keep working. Don't let it bother you. That might be a little too low for me. Oh, good fistful egg burger. He seemed quite accommodating, but I put my things together and quickly retreated into the guest house. Yeah. We're gonna go take a bit of a quit, Allie. We're gonna go take a bit of a bathroom break. Yeah? We'll be right back, okay? Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hi, hi. Mm. Hello. So we're a little less than halfway through. So maybe we'll try to get to halfway done for this stream, and then we can do another half next time. Mm. I think that's a good plan. Yeah. I hope you are enjoying it. Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay, where were we? Oh, very rare fish. What'd you get? Good job, T. Legendary blue whale. So proud of you. Okay. Maybe for the second half we'll do adjust fireplace. Yeah. I don't really want to do fireplace lo-fi. Mm-hmm. Let me know if that's loud enough, okay? I think y'all can hear it decently. A little louder. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That actually might be a little too loud. You'll have to let me know. Mm. Uh, we'll stick with this for now, though. Yeah. Chibi usually behaved coolly towards humans, and yet, when she came over from the neighbors to the east, she seemed completely transformed, sticking her nose into every corner of the expansive greenery, intensely focused, plunging her front feet into things, jumping and prancing, and taking off running in circles at top speed, as if she were completely out of control. After the old woman and old man moved out, when none of the garden lanterns were lit and no lights were on in the house, this went on through the middle of the night till the wee hours in the morning. The garden was like a forest to Chibi. Sometimes I go on long walks with her, watching her respond intensely to her entire surroundings, the energy rippling through her whole body. She would race recklessly around one particular area, and then climb high up into the trees, exposing her body in midair, as if about to veer off in another direction, trembling. And there I was, taking in the whole show. So now we found ourselves in the most unusual position. So now we found ourselves in the unusual position of enjoying the full extent of the mansion, finished grounds without paying a penny more in rent. I could play around to my heart's content, our little guest explorer. But as time would tell, this too would have to come to an end. When the old man died in October, the old woman made yet another decision, and she assembled her 4 children to announce it. With the rapid rise in land prices in recent years, passing on the house to her children after she died likely carry a heavy, would likely carry punishing inheritance taxes. So to avoid this, she felt like it would be best to sell the property along with both houses while she was still alive. The deadline for the sale was set for August 1990. Considering the inevitability of my parting with Chibi, our nightly frolics became tinged with a certain sadness. I concocted some schemes that would give us a way to stay there a little longer, but then realized that most of these were no longer feasible, given the rapid price inflation Japan experienced in real estate over the past few years. It was this course of events that taught me the meaning of the word subdivision. In my mind, I drew a line north to south that would just barely allow the guest house to remain when the property was subdivided. If we could buy it, our life with Chibu would also be able to continue. But even at a modest plot of that size, would still be impossible for us to afford. Thoughts like this streamed through my head as Chibi stood at my side. It just made it all the more painful. One day, all of a sudden, the house she visits closed up. She places her front paws against the window and peers in, but the interior is dark and empty, and the entrance is boarded up. In the days that follow, she goes back to check a number of times. She presses her head against the window glass, but there is no one there. Soon, a demolition crew comes to tear down this new, now obsolete and disused place. But all this is no more than the imaginings of a human. I began to look for a new rental in the same area at a local realtor's office. We could find nothing appropriate in the vicinity. So, placing the Sokova tree at the center of the target area, and gradually widening my search in an outward-reaching spiral, I began searching for a new house in the vicinity that would allow for us to keep Chibi. I vowed I would work even harder to find the right place for Chibi. Overhearing me mutter to myself, my wife smiled a wry sort of smile. Odd. I used still to refer to as a guest, despite becoming so attached. November 2 had passed, and the faded purple of the garden saffron was now waning. The same saffron which, back when my wife was planting its bulbs, had caused Chibi to creep up from her behind and place one paw in a hole my wife had dug as if to say, let's dig some more. As autumn deepened, and the leaves of the Sokova were falling thickly, we moved into the full-scale house-hunting mode. At the same time, though we did not know why, Chibi's visits grew more frequent. Moreover, the time she spent with us was longer, sometimes as much as half a day. Of course, aside from eating in the cardboard box in the corner of the tatami room, the small mackerel my wife had fried for her sitting on the desk, near the window gazing out at the scenery, her visits consisted primarily of sleeping. After watching her tiny figure leap past the mirror stand and slip through the gap in the hanging strips of cloth onto the pile of cushions, the upper shelf of the closet, I would leave her undisturbed for a while. Then, having judged the time to be right, my wife would take one end of the hanging strips of cloth and peek gently inside. Often, Chiba would be in the midst of grooming herself, using her small, precise tongue, but would stop suddenly and look over her shoulder at the intruder. Then, after a while, when my wife had another peek, she would be nearly asleep, eyelids sagging, and her body rolled into a little ball. Given a little more time, she would be sleeping peacefully, with her white belly moving up and down with her breathing. It was funny watching my wife looking at between the strips of cloth to peep at Chibi. I would imagine Chibi's sleeping figure from her muffled laughter. It was all pretty funny, almost borderline weird. Chibi came and went 3 times a day, staying for around 3 hours each. Yay! Staying for around 3 hours each. After the neighbors, her official owners, went to sleep, she would slip through the boundary hedge and come over to the side of the house, where the lights were still brightly lit. Then she would show that she wanted to play, and a game of ball would begin in the garden. After a while, she would tire of the game, and in the pre-dawn hours retire to the closet and sleep. She seemed to find pleasantly comfortable the combination of this twilight nook with its human smell and softness of the cushions. The couple at work at their desks through the night would follow her lead and go to sleep. But then the small guest would be awake by 7:40 a.m. At the latest, or 7:40 a.m. at the latest. Eat the food which had been prepared for her in her cardboard box, and drink up the milk in the saucer placed beside it, and quickly leave. Later, we learned the reason that for her morning rush, that she would always see off the little boy when he left for nursery school, wandering in the abyss of half-sleep. I would sometimes hear the spirited voice of the boy, his mother repeating reminders to be careful, which he obliviously ignored. As the two parted at the corner of Lightning Alley, despite the early hour, Chippy would always be waiting there, standing and waiting in the corner, and then run after the boy a little ways to see him off each morning. Mixed in with the voices of mother and child would be the sound of Chibi's bell, and this is how I knew she would be there. After she was finished seeing off the boy, she would continue her carefree inspection of the garden, fanning out in a broader range of ground. At various points she would go back on her own place with the neighbors and eat. Perhaps she had more cat naps planned for this time as well. Occasionally, before we even got out of bed, she would already be back over at our place asleep on one of the cushions in the closet. Having pulled open strips of cloth with her paw and jumped back in. After getting up late in the morning, my wife would pull open the strips of cloth and peek in at Chibi. Don't you think she really belongs to us? She seemed especially pleased with the prospect that she gazed at Chibi's sleeping figure. Eating and sleeping as much as he liked, circulating freely between between locales. It seemed as if the boundary between the two households itself had come into question. Even the words we used to talk about Chibi had become a mass of confusion. Was her coming to our home a return? A homecoming? Or was it the other way around? Was home really over there? The home situation seemed to be in flux. Once, when we had been out for the day, we had returned to find Chibi there in the dim light of the entrance to welcome us. Seated properly, feet together on the raised wooden floor, as if she was a young girl who had been left to take care of the house while we were away. See, I told you, she's our girl. Or so my wife said. Though she knew she wasn't really ours, which is why it seemed all more as if she was a gift from afar, an honored guest bestowing her presence upon us. Even after her visits became more frequent, Chibi never let out as much as a meow. And a meow, meow. And she would not let us pick her up. It was summer. Late in the night, after we had fallen asleep, came the sound of the scampering feet, unusual for Chibi to be running around like that in the middle of the night. She had jumped off on the nightstand covered with a tablecloth, which had been pushed over near the window when we laid out the futons before bed. From there, she suddenly jumped onto the screen over the open window and was hanging there by her claws. I realized now that something was wrong. She remained fixed high up on the inside of the screen like a tropical lizard, extending her neck trying to look over the fence between our yard and our house. Even in this fix, she made no sound. Finally, my wife thought of something. She went into the other room to check the floor-level window, and discovered that it was closed. On the previous night, Chibi had entered through the front door, which was unusual, and we had inadvertently left her private window closed. I often remember how my wife, an eccentric in her own right, ever since then referred to the cat door as Chibi's nostalgic passageway. Her longing for a way home? I suppose the screen incident was a roundabout way the world had telling of my wife that Chibi, after all, was not ours. That fall, we took delivery of a package for our neighbors while they were away. Once she had determined that they were back, my wife took the package over them. The front door was left open, so she rang the bell and stood in the entry waiting for someone to appear, but it was Chibi who came to greet her rather than the lady of the house. My wife was stunned. Chibi had been coming over to our house every morning and every night, for who knows how long, and never left a sound. But now, for the first time, she opened her mouth and began expressing herself at great lengths. The content of her speech, or so my wife reported to me, with the utmost seriousness, was not about thanking us for taking care of her all that time, but rather the usual social niceties, chattering about the weather and so on. and all other insincere politenesses that neighbors often exchange. Even for my wife, who to all appearances seemed to have such a rapport with Chibi. This was the only time she made her voice heard, and of course, her reserve went without saying it when it came to adult males, from whom Chibi always kept a certain distance. When winter came, I was over at the big house one afternoon, in the underground storage space attached to the kitchen, to stow away some large containers of kerosene. I pulled open the wood panel which acted as a door. It went down. Suddenly there was Chibi, who had come down behind me. She walked leisurely across the concrete, which had been added to provide a firm footing in place, and then jumped down onto one of the shelves. With her front feet neatly aligned on the porch, she began to observe the procedures as they unfolded. As I waited for the automatic pump to finish transferring kerosene into the small space heater, there was of course no central heating in the old house. I tried imitating the way my wife would often talk to Chibi, making her words into a little song. Together we just two, down below the ground. In response, Chibi crouched down, feet still placed together, and shaped her mouth as if about to roar like a savage beast, all while glaring at me fixedly. Meanwhile, she gathered herself as if she were about to pounce. Perhaps it was a form of intimidation meant as a proper young lady's preemptive strike against a potential molester. Oh. One other day, she came bolting through the open door, facing the little garden of the guest house like a bullet, and immediately hid in the tiny space between some furniture and a small storage box. With her backside facing towards me, she was shaking so hard I felt sorry for her. When I turned towards the door, there was Cal, the calico cat who had belonged to neighbors to the south, eyes blazing, ready to pounce. Somehow, this attack on Chibi looked more jealousy-based than territorial. Perhaps because Chibi came and went as she liked between the two houses. I had noticed there had been some dispute between the two of them a few days earlier, when I had rescued Chibi from a branch high in a tree where I discovered her cornered. Cal was an impressive calico, but only Chibi was allowed inside, which may have led to the recurring cycle of attacks. The more she was attacked, the more cautious and fearful she became, while Cal's behavior became increasingly bold. He's probably... Hi, Skylar. Hi. He's probably absolutely cute and lovable when he's at home next door to my wife. So she began calling his name and talking to him a bit when he appeared in the garden, so he wouldn't feel so jealous. Miss Muddy seemed to be in the same class as the old lady, for she was getting on in years now. Her fur had a pattern of Indian ink in mud-colored splotches, but her eyes were large and translucent, and she had a calm disposition, even a cozy air of nostalgia about her. I suppose she had reasons of her own, something in her past perhaps, that she made find ways to open the doors and windows of people's houses. Old alley cat that she was, she must have been in a situation at some point in her life where she had a home. One night, when my wife was home alone, she sensed the movement of the cloth hanging over the floor-level window, and heard the sound of cat feet, which always meant that Chibi had arrived. But when she turned around, there was Miss Muddy. The window must have been left open wider than usual. When their eyes met, both Miss Muddy and my wife were surprised. The old alley cat turned around and ran out, bumping into the side of the cat door on the way out, making a loud noise. My wife provided a vivid description of the event. It was pretty funny, she said, but I felt a little sorry for her. Strangely enough, Chibi and Miss Muddy seemed to get along. Once my wife saw the two of them in Lightning Alley, Miss Muddy rolling around on the ground, showing her big white teeth, and Chibi directly above her, perched on the wooden fence. Miss Muddy ran into the building lining the neighbor's property to the north, and Chibi followed in close pursuit. The two disappeared into the darkness, and it was quiet. After a while, Chippy came over to the house alone, and my wife put the question to her, "Are you friends with Miss Muddy?" Perhaps it was because she was old of age. Perhaps it was because she was the age of one of the old woman's granddaughters. But in any case, my wife and the landlady seem to have no disagreements in particular. My wife says that on another day, she saw Chibi and Miss Money together for a long time, deep in conversation on the other side of a wooden fence on the north end of the property, just below the knothole through which the images of passerbys always appeared. They weren't meowing together in a matter-of-fact way. It seemed more like they were intimately discussing their personal lives. She tilted her head to the side as she spoke, as if not quite believing her words. A few days passed after Chibi had raced like a bullet into the house running from cow. It was morning on a January day, and my wife was alone in the house. After she awoke, she began to prepare breakfast. When Chibi emerged from the closet and jumped down into the tatami mat floor. She stood still there for a while. Something wasn't right. Some of the white fur on her back was torn out. And though you could see the red-colored skin, Chibi looked at my wife for a while, and then slowly returned to her place next door. It appeared she wasn't injured badly, so my wife calmed herself and returned to her desk where she had a rush job waiting. In less than 15 minutes, Chibi was back. She had gauze bandage wrapped around her torso. She jumped onto the desk as if to say, "Look what happened to me," then sat down and exposed her helpless figure to my wife, and gazed at her with a feeble expression. My wife gazed back, though she thought of how they would soon have to part. All the conflicted feeling came rushing in. After all, she isn't really ours. But maybe I wish she really were. Chippy stared intently into her deep green eyes at the clear liquid flowing from my wife's eyes and rolling down her cheeks. The human things called tears. Okay, we are officially halfway through. Yeah. So I think we're gonna go ahead and end it off there. Bit of a shorter stream today. But I hope it was entertaining. It sounds like y'all were having a good time with the fishing at least. Let's take a peek at the leaderboard, shall we? Yeah. Aww. That's sweet of you, Tika. Oh, I missed it. Wait, I missed it. We gotta do it again. We gotta do it again. Is it gonna work? Let's find out. I am really glad they all had such a good time, though. Yeah. Would y'all want to see this again, or should we just end it here? Would you be interested in doing like I don't think every week, but maybe twice a month or something, like a reading stream? Oh, every 300 seconds? Well, I guess we'll find out next time. Maybe. Definitely let me know if it's something you'd be interested in. Okay, we're kind of like relaxed, borderline ASMR age, so let me see if I can find someone who does something similar. Oh, that's my voice. Let's not listen to that. No one I follows. Twice a month is good. Okay, we'll try to do that. I'm looking for someone who's either doing like a quiet game or ASMR or something. Yeah. Oh, they're doing ASMR perfect. Miss Miyuni. And it looks like it's her partner anniversary. Yeah. So that'll work out perfectly. Okay. Am I even allowed to read into her? Let's find out. Wah. Yes, okay. If you would so choose, you can use this as a read message. Comfy cat read. Yeah. No, not comfy cat Allie. Comfy cat read. Yeah. Definitely go say hi to her, okay? You'll have such a very wonderful day. And I will see you tomorrow? Question mark? I forgot. Yes, tomorrow we're playing League of Legends, so I'll see you then, okay? Love you all so much for being here. Bye-bye.